Hey, Matt, thanks for coming on. Could you give everybody who doesn't already know you a quick summary on who you are and why you're here?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm Matt Barh. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Fairing. We power attribution surveys for about 2,000 Shopify Plus brands. And excited to jump into all things post-purchase surveys, Shopify, and more.
In the length of a tweet or a tweet thread, what did we talk about today?
Yeah, we spoke about opportunities in the Shopify ecosystem, which was fun. And we also went pretty deep into some of the thinking around Fairing and what we're building for in the future.
I'm Amy Syed,
I'm Sean Collins.
and this is Numbers and Narratives.
All right, cool. So maybe we figure out what we want to chat about, because I think like the SaaS Shopify thing is kind of interesting. Like I think like the thing that you said about race to the bottom is super, like that's something that I've definitely found is like I have like theses as to why, and it's like part of it is like maybe kind of unkind to small Shopify brands, like not on purpose, but like a little. So maybe it depends, right? Like I don't want to like piss off my customers. I don't want to piss off your customers. I don't want to piss off like the listeners. But like my sort of like take is that it's like difficult for what is effectively an online version of a mom and pop shop to like purchase technology. Like they're not really like technology minded.
Yeah, I think that the TAM wasn't or isn't nearly as big as everyone thought. And given that the TAM was, given everyone thought it was big, there was so much capital and kind of this new cohort of founders who thought like they could build an app and make money very quickly. And now there's just like this massive amount of supply on the app side. And there's like, we look at what the founder of Lifetime is doing with CommSlayer. He's like trying to compete with Gorgeous for free. Obviously, I'm sure there's a pricing model eventually coming to that, but like for these brands that are very margin constrained and cost conscious, like that's not a good environment to try to own a market. And I think the proliferation of just like being able to build applications too with all this Gen AI stuff, there's just going to be, I think there was one post-purchase survey app when we launched called Grapevine, which is still there. We're still friendly with that team. He has like a suite of apps. Their biggest mistake was probably calling it Grapevine, because I wasn't trying to build a survey. I was trying to like find a survey app and couldn't find one. They've been around before us. And I think last I counted, there was 27 post-purchase survey apps in the App Store, probably like 8 or 9 of which have been caught with like our images on their app listings. It's just like clearly that someone is just trying to like, oh, I can make a survey app and do 30% of what Fairing does and like acquire some customers. So I would assume a lot of those other apps are doing a couple $1,000s a month, but it definitely creates optionality. It creates all these other dynamics that we didn't have initially, just in a more competitive environment.
I think that you've hit on a couple really, really interesting points there. One is that like they're definitely margin constrained. The average, like there's a lot of businesses that use Shopify to like, it's like a fat tail of businesses, right? Like if you look at like store leads or all of these like sources that aggregate Shopify stores and Shopify information, like there's like a lot of folks that are like below $1 million in revenue, some that are like slightly bigger than that, and they go up to like, I don't know, 1 to 10, 10 to 50. And there's actually like not that many that are like 100 million plus. And I think you kind of, if you want to start selling any sort of enterprise deal, I think that's like kind of what you have to wait for. I think that like you tell me, right? Like where are you guys? Like Fairing started off as, I assume, a Shopify app?
Yeah, we're started off as a Shopify app, started off as a side project. So we founded the company in 2016. I was a merchant for about 7 years before that. The first product that we set out to build was in the same day delivery space, of all places. So this is almost a decade ago. Uber Rush and Postmates had APIs. I don't even know if they still exist today. And the company I was at, this headphone company I helped start called Master and Dynamic, we were one of the first to integrate with these, like both APIs. We had this like simple routing mechanism that allowed people to get headphones within an hour in New York. And at the time, I was enamored with the idea. Yeah, it's just like, this is the future. Also, if you like open TechCrunch or any like Adweek or anything, like same day delivery was the future. so I left that company to really initially go solve top of funnel demand. I was like, we're selling more headphones in like Soho Apple Store. Like, how do I drive more customers to our site? And then quickly pivoted to a B2B SaaS for same day and never really found product market fit. I think we had like 15 customers. We were charging $500 a month. And arguably like half of those customers were just using me for consulting. And one of them was doing a ton of influencer gifting, couldn't measure it in GA. No one was using promo codes in typical kind of startup idea fashion. I was just like, go at a survey. Only way I could figure out how to do it at the time was with a Google form and like dropping it into this other app because you couldn't edit the thank you page. And then Aaron, the founder of that company, came back a couple months later. Is like, hey, just so you know, like I use this Google form, like it's like all I use, but it doesn't connect to the order data, so I never know who's saying anything. So that was really the catalyst. It was the combination of not finding product market fit and not necessarily looking for another thing to build, but just being very opportunistic. Aaron saying that, and then my co-founder, who's our CTO, over Christmas break, essentially learned Elixir, which is what like Discord and essentially like Golden and a lot of these high transaction volume companies use as their core language. And I didn't really need to convince him to try this because he was like obsessed with Elixir at the time. We weren't using it. We're still writing everything in Node. He's like, oh, this is a perfect application for Elixir. And like, he just opened up another repo and we started building it. So
That's so funny. Engineers will like, it's so funny to like how you can like incentivize engineers to like do the things that you want to do.
it's all habits out. It's like, if he wasn't learning that, I'm sure he'd been like, what are you talking about? Like we've been doing this for 18 months. We're going to keep kind of iterating until we find product market fit here. And then the other kind of tidbit with that is I get asked pretty often, it's like, how did you guys measure product market fit initially? And it's just like, you didn't even have to measure it. Like there was no product market fit in the same day. Like every customer was a slog. We launched this thing, Enquire initially, and it was very cheap, which little barrier to entry. And like within the first month, I think there's like 30 plus stores installed it. And it was just like, oh, this is what product market fit feels like. So quickly pivoted thereafter to helping solve top of funnel measurement.
That's awesome.
It is, and I remember, and I was at Barrel, which is a Shopify agency, in 2019, I guess, when we met, and that quickly became like another one of these apps that I was like, this is a requirement for anybody who's going to work with us on the ad side. Was like, you have to have this app, because the price was low enough that there's some apps that I'd push for, and they'd be like, we're not paying $2,000 for this app just because you say we need it. But I think yours was like, it was like $30, right? Something like that.
It was crazy. Yeah. Now we have volume-based pricing, which is a intelligent move for us, just from the effort it's required for some of these larger brands, and some of the other certifications and stuff we've gotten. But yeah, it started off as, I've like all these screenshots, started off as 10, then it went to 30, then it went to 30, 60, 100. And then we moved to volume-based pricing.
On the Shopify being a tough place to build note, kind of going back to that one. One of the things I think about a lot is how tough it is for Shopify to continue to evolve and innovate without kind of trampling on the the app ecosystem.
The partner, yeah.
Like, how do you think that they balance that, right? Like you were saying, like you didn't used to be able to edit the thank you page unless you were on Plus. Then they started like opening up all these things that you could. And then there became, all the post-purchase upsells and all these other, like it creates opportunities, but at the same time, it then like shuts down opportunities where like, okay, now you add in native subscriptions and that makes subscription apps less necessary and stuff like that. How do you think they kind of balance that? And what is how much does a builder have to think about that when they're coming up with an idea?
Yeah, I think it's definitely more difficult, arguably, to build something larger today because of that level of there's almost like sometimes it feels like there's lack of communication between teams at Shopify. And I think that's almost on purpose with how they build products. But one of the things that we deal with often is like, we're a checkout extension, and it's like, well, now we need a POS extension. And it's like, oh, well, the design libraries are totally different. So what is possible on web is a totally different, like we have to now think about edge cases on POS. So it's definitely getting a little bit more difficult. I'm not exactly sure how they think about it. I think one of the most intelligent things they've done is move to this kind of component like extension world, um, giving them way more control over the user experience. Like if we think about Android versus iOS from a kind of usability standpoint. And I think initially everyone complained how Apple locked everything down. And I think people finally came around to realizing why that is a net positive. So I'm definitely very opportunistic with the end consumer experience and like the pace in which people will build apps because of those things. So I think that's definitely one of the best moves they've made, but I'm not entirely sure how they think about the different teams where like checkout is a different team than accounts. It's yeah, I wouldn't say it's an impossible problem. It's definitely a very difficult problem to solve at their scale.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to accounts, like a little bit of a sidebar, I wrote a blog post in 2020 about user accounts. I think user accounts are like, if we weren't building what we're building today, I'd definitely be hacking around in user accounts. Like I think there's a world where Shopify allows cross-store logins where you log in on Skims and then you're logged in on any other Shopify store because they're able to identify you. So if that's the case, then like the user experience might push more to this logged in personalized state where like personalized pricing or personalized upsells are not based on some like random identity graph. It's based on like some deterministic value of this is Matt. So I think that's just, I was obsessed with it in 2020. I'm still obsessed with it. It's like, how do we give like an Uber-like experience where like you and I get different pricing and different personalization on every e-commerce store, and like it's login is required. So I am super excited to see that team make some like serious inroads there, just from an end consumer experience.
Do you think that like starts in the shop app where it's a little, it's sort of is already a little more centralized?
Yeah, I honestly don't think so. I think as more apps, this is kind of where this is probably the biggest opportunity for apps, as more apps build into the account pages. To me, it's like, is there a world where merchants send their existing customers to a logged in account page where they could then merchandise and shop versus sending them to like an open, non blocked like PDP or homepage? That's kind of where I see it. I don't know. The shop app is, they're definitely iterating. I'm not entirely sure on their strategy, but my question is, at what point will merchants send customers to a logged in account experience that is extension, essentially just driven by a series of extensions versus liquid code on the front end? So that the incentive is like better measurement. It's like less anonymous users, personalization, like all the incentives are aligned. The question will be like, yeah, people have hacked around logging in users through different mechanisms with Shopify. So we'll see where that ends up. But that's probably the thing I'm most excited outside of everything we're doing at Fairing within the Shopify space.
That's really interesting. Because then you think about like, like the brands like Yotpo and some of these loyalty apps that could almost either own that experience or do something to kind of create a single login that you can like input all your loyalty programs in and now have a unified page. And that could similarly be pretty slick, where you can have cross-store bundles, you can have cross-store promos, you can kind of have everything.
The best examples are on merchandising. So I recently moved to the suburbs out of New York. I have a Rep Fitness like power rack in my basement, and like there's all these attachments for my rack, let's say, and I have like the cheaper, smaller one, and only 30% of the attachments attached to my rack. It's like, I should be getting like, stop trying to sell me on all this other merchandise product on their website. Like give me a personalized experience based on what I already have, because you've already seen my behavior. I'm like 100 times more likely to buy these other attachments. So I think that's so hard to do on the front end, from a design perspective, from like just managing the storefront code base. If we think about logged in users versus not, where it's like, if all of that could be beautifully merchandised in the account page, like I'm now less browsing Rep. I'm more so going to like, what is for me from Rep. So that's just how I think about it. I'll send you guys that blog post. I know I chat with Patrick, who's one of the lead PMs on account pages at Shopify all the time, and he gets really, really amped about kind of at least what I'm visioning, because I feel like we're pretty much aligned.
I'll be controversial here for a hot sec, because that always, drives views. You guys, I mean, because you guys are a post-purchase survey platform, how often, like, what's the sort of breakdown between, and I don't know if you know this, how often sort of like people come back, like the people that are landing on a site, like come back, versus like how often it's like new? Because like My sort of question to you is like, how often are you going back to like reps landing page of your own accord to like shop around and see like what new stuff they have? Like, is that like a once a month thing, a once a quarter thing, a once every 6 months thing, or like a once a year thing?
Yeah, for me, that's probably once a month. It's based on them launching. Like, I don't know, because I use that example very purposely. It's a very modular product. It's not like a one and done where it gets way more difficult. But the fact that you buy something and can add attachments to it is why I keep going back. But apparel is another example where there could be a high repeat rate as well. And it's like the only store that I know that does this is Bonobos, where they like you save your fit, and then when you browse Bonobos, it's your fit. It's like the most useful thing. It's like what's in stock with my fit. It's like crazy that is not a thing everywhere. So yeah, those are the types of things, and I think people. This goes back to like no one has solved personalization on like the anonymous, non-logged in user state, and I think it's just like I don't want to say it's impossible, but it's just so big of a problem where if you have this deterministic like email, it just gets like it's now just a basic algorithm. You don't have to get super intelligent with it around identifying who people are.
Yeah, because I was going to bring up the fact that I think that a lot of, at least for our customers, the attribution driver for like somebody going back to the website is largely like a marketing, like some sort of like marketing hit, right? Like they've like gotten an email or something.
That'll never go away. I think that the question is, does the landing page change? Like, are you now sending people into this logged in state that kind of says what they've already bought from the brand so that like they can almost complete your look or complete your set? Or
it's almost like a soft off. Like it's almost like a soft off.
You can very easily picture a world where through Gen AI, you're able to say like, even if you are pushing to a PDP, you're able to say like, you're able to customize the copy on that PDP and say, we think you'd like this one because you've bought these products and whatever, right? Like you identified these preferences. This is similar to a thing, whatever. Like you can, whether that's through Gen AI, whether that's a Shopify Flow thing, whether that's an account page thing, like it seems like we are not too far off from that being significantly easier. Although I feel like we've been saying personalization's a tool away for 10 years.
I had coffee with someone last week who's doing, and it's for personalization, but I don't think it's using historical personalized data. It's more so like you're looking at a coat and it's like, hey, it looks like you're in New York and it's cold, buy our coat. So trying to like inject personalized PDP copy for the user based on like whether it's UTM parameters or whatnot. So, but I think I go back to often, it's like, if we think about where advertising was 20 years ago and before, the whole concept of like a persona was like your buyer personas was like a exercise that everybody did. And there was some like after the fact analysis of like, okay, we did this exercise. Is that who's purchasing? Like, what are the different cohorts of customers? And with the proliferation of just like money in, money out, a lot of that went away. Like we talk to people all the time that are quite large. I'm like, do you have a document internally of like who your buyer personas are? And then I go back to like, from a personalization standpoint, like that would already like 2x the experience if you had 3 to 5 buyer personas that you just personalized for that. So there's like low hanging fruit, I think, with how people can think about personalization, that it's just always been overcomplicated, or it's like been so focused on A/B testing as like a framework to get to an optimized state that people are kind of, it's like people just think of button color and basic copy and less so merchandising and other areas that I think would really affect conversion rates.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I have this conversation since I lean more retention side of things. I have this conversation all the time with people where they're like, I know I should segment my emails or my texts, but then they're like, I don't know like how much, or then it's going to have to do like 100 versions. It's like, you don't have to do 100 versions. Like you can crawl, walk, run into a lot of this. And it can start with as simply as like, did you purchase before or not? Have you purchased from this collection or this collection? Like, it doesn't have to be the whole world is completely personalized. And it's like you log into the page that says, hey, Matt, here's the 10 products you bought before. We know everything about you. It can simply be a more relevant experience that applies some filters. Like if you bought a large on a collection page of the same type of thing, if you bought a large shirt before, why wouldn't you default to large being selected as a filter?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It definitely gets more, I'd say typically gets more difficult in categories like apparel. Like the layup that I always mention is we still work with this very technical product, and they have 3 cohorts of customers. It is like hobbyists, educators, and students. So they ask that question in their varying post-purchase survey of like, how would you describe yourself? Or which of these applies to you? And then they just push that to Klaviyo, and they have 3 cohorts of people. If you're a student, and it's just like the easiest mechanism for personalization. A little bit difficult with like, you're selling apparel. It's like you kind of have to come up with customer facing names of these personas, but it's definitely possible.
I think an interesting way to do it is, imagine if you could parameterize like different, maybe this is actually already the case. Like, I don't develop directly on top of Shopify, but Sean, I'm thinking about, Matt, like we have a product where you can feed someone's like order history to our bot, and it'll like be able to spit out like personalized details about that person. That could be anything from like personalized copy to like personalized like product links to personalized whatever. And currently customers use it like in emails. It's like a small selling product for us. But my thought is that if you could have a homepage that's generated using parameters, all you'd need to actually do quote unquote soft off is to be able to pass those parameters into to like generate a link, right? Where it's like, hey, like I know Matt is a guy, and so like give him like men things, and like, or like, and you don't have to generate it by like the person's name or whatever. You can generate it by their order history. Like, it generally solves for male things, has this product, and even like be more explicit than that, where it's like the algorithm just defines like the things that you should be shown at any given point, and you have like an ID in there, and that ID like passes back the information to the feedback loop for the model, and so it can like consistently like get more information to learn from based on what you clicked and what you didn't click, and it kind of provides you like a personalized experience every single time. And I think like it makes it so you don't have to deal with identity, right? Because like one of the big problems is on the browser side, you have all these like identity mechanisms that block people like block, like, because a lot of the way that it happens right now is it's like on the cookie side. And so this way you just like, you solve the problem by, it's like when you open like a dashboard, like Looker, for example, and it like has all of the stuff that builds the dashboard in the parameter section. And so you can just like send the same, if you make like edits and stuff to a dashboard, you can send the same one to someone else, and like they'll load what you've loaded, like with all the filters and shit applied. It's kind of the same. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I know someone who's doing that with discount codes, or like instead of just applying a discount code to the cart, it'll like also do things like change the banner. It's like, welcome so-and-so who referred you through this code. It's a little bit more lightweight than like full on, but yeah, 100, arguably that's how what you're saying is how I would think about solving this initially. That doesn't rely on something that could be blocked 30 or 40% of the time.
That's actually kind of interesting. What do you think the ROI is on that? Like, pretty high, right? Like, if you're getting somebody to drive stuff to the website, they're gonna like bounce within 5 seconds if like nothing's relevant, and like the higher probability that you increase that relevance for the thing that they land on, right? Am I thinking about it the right? Am I thinking about it the right way? Like, that's like a fairly good, like,
yeah, at scale, there's definitely I'd say little chance that doesn't increase someone's conversion rate at scale. Yeah, it's showing me like men's clothes versus women's clothes when I land on XYZ site.
Do you know, like, I actually don't off the top of my head know what the Wearly attribution sources are for repeat customers. I think SimilarWeb has this data. It'd be interesting to like see.
Yeah, it runs the gamut. Like so we powered about like 30 million people last year answered a how did you hear about us question. We also power like a what led you to Bombas today, for example. Similar channels in that sense. Like, it could still be Meta, it could still be TV. But you also just have your lower own channels like email and SMS that are like driving a big deal of conversions, especially if you have like periodic sales that is essentially the reason why somebody is buying again. So it gets a little bit more complex on the repeat side. And then a lot of customers, there's a lot of money spent on retargeting and remarketing in general, but like a lot of like my Bombas behavior, for example, is I don't know, I need more socks. I just go to bombas.com and I buy more socks. Like, it's not necessarily any marketing that is driving that purchase. The marketing is like the fact that my whole drawer is just Bombas socks and I wear them every day. So yeah, definitely more complicated. And like, I don't know, you could argue it's less ROI driven than top of funnel new customer, just given the like LTV of a potential customer.
I like that a lot. I think Gen AI also like makes this a little bit easier. I think part of this, I have a thesis, which is like, and I don't know if you've seen this, Matt, like, I'm going to try to say this in the least unkind way, but I think a lot of the issues that I at least had when trying to sell to Shopify companies is like statistically, right? Because if you're going after a pool of Shopify companies, like the distribution of the people that you have meetings with for sales calls are going to follow the distribution of Shopify companies. Like, yeah, you'll get like a big guy from time to time. But a lot of these, like, the thing that surprised me the most is I think that people are just not using, like, they're not trained to use the tools to like their advantage. Like the number of people that like I met, because we sell into like the ecom, we started selling into the ecom email space at first, and the number of people that didn't know how to use like injectable, what do you call it? Sean, I'm not an email person. Like, what do you call like the personal?
Like snippets,
dynamic.
okay.
Yeah, dynamic like
Or
product
merge
properties
tags.
to be able to like change emails is like crazy. Like they didn't know the difference between like an event and like a dimension. And that was like something where I had to really get my head around it. Like they were like, "Oh, how do I do this in Klaviyo?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Like we make it dead easy. Like all of the events come in as events at the user property level, at the user level, and everything else comes in on the user property. So just like dynamically inject the block. Like I don't know how to do that." I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I think what happens is like we would go into these meetings where you talk about like ML models and product recommendations and like you know, collaborative filtering versus something else. And like people were just like, "What are you talking about? I have no idea." And I think part of the reason for that, I think something that might be interesting is I think the populace might be a little bit more like, might have like some more technical prowess to them just because of the ease of use of something like ChatGPT. And if you can go in and type in like, instead of like saying machine learning model hoo-ha, like figure out like what products this person gets, you can say if they like Bombas ankle socks, then like give them more Bombas ankle socks. And you literally type that into like a prompt that like looks at what somebody bought, and then the agent, like the AI agent, decides and injects it in. And so you give sort of like this level of control to a person that wasn't sort of like a technically minded person before.
Yeah, I think simple implementations win in most cases. Even if you're doing something more complex in the background, it goes back to like, we clearly preach like Occam's razor all the time, where you're like, if you have all these variables and it's like, well, what actually worked? Was it the fact that it was like sunny and that's why people bought more? Is it because I spent like 2 weeks training this model to recommend umbrellas to someone? Or I guess lack of umbrellas. So I think it really depends. I think that could be totally the case from a recommendation side of things. And I think a lot of people, to your point, maybe overcomplicate certain, like whether it's personalization in email or not, which just create like, it almost puts them in stasis from like, well, I don't know how to do this. So simplifying things is definitely the goal. Like we're in the attribution and measurement space. Like we think of ourselves as a measurement company more than a survey company, and we're essentially we're attempting to solve a problem that'll never be solved. Deterministically, as far as like what exactly led a customer to go purchase or repeat purchase. So we're trying to kind of obfuscate all the stuff we're doing away, like the sciencey things away, and how do we create a question asking product that just gets the right output, that is easy to set up. Even we get questions all the time. It's like, we're starting to advertise on connected TV. How do I word connected TV in my attribution survey? And those are like basic things that you should just click connected TV, and we'll just add it for you based on whether it's our best practice or what kind of we've seen our model recommends for how to word that question. So yeah, I agree. I think there's definitely also, if we think about the size of the Shopify ecosystem, it's like your normal adoption curve. There's going to be early adopters who are using 99% of these tools and the majority of customers or users are going to be kind of in the apex of that area who are using maybe half. And depends who you're trying to onboard. Like we're definitely trying to focus more on like those early adopters to get us more momentum and more feedback. And that's the signal that we want the most right now, which we'll figure out is the right decision or not down the road.
And so when you think about those early adopters, then, you talked about trying to transition and add in more SaaS to your client base and adjusting the product. How sort of one-to-one do you kind of see the initial early adopters on the SaaS side or mobile app side being? And how much is this like you have to adapt the product and problem and the way you present everything? How do you think about buyer personas changing from a Shopify merchant to a SaaS leader? Like what's kind of going through your head now?
Yeah, the biggest difference is the tech stack, obviously. Like Shopify, like we've had some of Shopify's biggest merchants get live with Fairing in like 10 minutes. It's like definitely give a high five to Shopify for making it so easy there. The joy for us of focus. So we made the decision so when we started the company 6.5 years ago, we were helping solve influencer attribution. That was like how we pitched Fairing. iOS 14 happened. Beautiful crystal ball. I wish I pretended that I predicted that. And then we started to build more survey-based functionality. Like we were looking at the Qualtrics of the world and the SurveyMonkeys of the world, and Qualtrics at the time was getting bought and sold multiple times, and it was like we could build a better Qualtrics for Ecomm. And like that was the opportunity. But at that point, we just started kind of going so horizontal and adding all these other features like multi-questions and all these things that we did a lot of things okay, but we didn't do one thing extremely well, which was the core thing that everyone was using this for, which is trying to understand the top of their funnel. So I just preface with all that because as we move to new verticals, into mobile, into SaaS, into just consumer web, for example, everything that we've learned in the Shopify space, like the abstraction that sits on top of this is the same. Like it's a very similar question. It's a very similar methodology. So all of the work that we're doing in these other verticals will help the Shopify merchants as well. And with this core customer base versus if we were going like super wide, the best example is like NPS. We get that asked that pretty often. We have a way to do it within our product. If we do NPS and then we go to like a large mobile app and we're like, hey, we want to power your surveys. It's like, well, we already use Medallia or Qualtrics or name the 10,000 other companies. And that's who they're copying us against. Where if we try to cross the chasm and we're like, hey, we are focused on is asking measurement related questions. And that is like the model that we've built is for that one hardcore thing, like getting those customers to come over to Fairing for that core part of their business will be a lot easier than getting them to go over for the entire bit. So that's how we're thinking about the different customer personas and how we can cross the chasm is just like our core focus in the problem we're solving. To get our foot in the door, this isn't to say we're not going to do all these other survey-based things in the future, but it's like, how do we 100x the value that we're doing with the core question we're asking today? And we're very fortunate that we do have this abstraction that works with non-commerce. Like if you're doing a loyalty program for e-commerce, like it's going to be very hard to port that over to SaaS, for example. That was not necessarily by design when we built the MVP of Fairing, but it's definitely been very helpful. And it's just market pull. Like we're just getting pulled into these spaces, not necessarily aggressively going after them. It's just like we get inbound from mobile marketers who are like, can we use you in our app? Which has obviously been a really good sign for us making those moves.
Yeah, that's clutch. I mean, I can say, before I left and started Holshire Analytics, I was leading growth marketing at a built, primarily an app-based company. And so I had to kind of create my own, how did you hear about us survey? And it was awful to manage because it was like it was a brazen app message that popped up, and, it's already kind of more complicated about like Shopify is nice because there's a very clear, logical time for when to ask this question. How long do I need to wait for someone to answer it when they install the app? Because I don't want to like ruin the user flow and have them not set up actually using the product. We're constantly testing new channels. How do you take those insights? And like the whole point of there's no point in capturing data if you aren't going to analyze it and use it. And so how do you actually turn it into something that is valuable? And I think that you guys did a fantastic job of it. And so that was actually why it was like a top priority for me. Was I was like, this was so important to me when I was doing Ecomm stuff. We should absolutely do this here. And it was always such a pain in the ass to manage.
The funny part is that's what we've learned. There's like all this super cool stuff we're working on the data side with like asking these questions intelligently. But ultimately, the driver of a lot of our initial interactions is like an engineer who's like, if my marketing team asked me to add another insert curse word channel into our survey, or the marketer being like, if I have to wait another month to edit my survey, like I'm going to go crazy because I'm like being held accountable for this. So it's funny, just like the UI of being able to control these things has definitely been a key driver initially, just the editability of this, which is an easy, non-defensible problem for us to solve. But yeah, it gets even smarter when it's like, to your point, like we're adding new channels. It's like, we should be able to add channels automatically. Like a few people write in other, like we can add that. We have labels and everything for this. So that's kind of where we're going, where we want it to be. The end state, hopefully in about 18 months, is like you just add our script and we'll pick your business vertical. So we'll make some assumptions about your channels. And then within a certain amount of volume, now we're just asking this intelligently and it's just feeding into a report for you and then probably getting pushed downstream to your data warehouse. And hopefully your whole team is now looking at this from LTV perspective and kind of other different ways to pivot this out.
Okay, I think it's about time we wrap this up. Any words of advice to close out to any either app developer or Shopify merchant on the measurement or build side?
Yeah, I think on the app developer side, I'm always happy to chat with other kind of app developers or SaaS founders in the ecosystem. Like the Shopify space is getting harder and harder. I think there's still a ton of opportunity. Again, account pages. I think there's really fun stuff that could be done in like on the admin extensions too. I'm hopeful that there's going to be some more, I don't know, just like fun apps being built for the merchant. I think that's like an area of focus that I think about often is what can be built to kind of surprise and delight the day-to-day of a merchant. Fun like generative AI app someone could build is just like, if you get a high order, there's like a custom message in the admin that's just like, hell yeah, like this is your highest order of the month. Like just like almost like a coach. I think there's some fun opportunities there. So I'm still very bullish on the whole app ecosystem. I don't know how bullish I am if I'm like go raise a bunch of money and do these things, especially how easy it is to build them. And then, yeah, we didn't get too much into measurement, but for merchants, yeah, I think I'm very bullish, obviously, with direct from consumers, kind of how we phrase all of the survey data here. But if you're advertising on more than just Meta, like the surprise and delight and time to value of using an attribution survey is pretty wild. Like you're just like within a couple of minutes, you're like, oh my God, there's a new channel I didn't think about, or I didn't know my word of mouth. There are all these different measurement gaps that get filled within a week. So definitely just take the leap and use us or any post-purchase survey app to at least view that data, use a trial, because it's going to help inform all the decisions across your org. So that's my parting thoughts. And yeah, if anyone wants to chat with me, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Twitter, matt@fairing.co. I'm happy to always connect.
We should also mention this episode was absolutely not sponsored by Bombas
Or Shopify.
I was laughing the whole time because I'm packing for a trip that I'm leaving on today, and the only socks that made it in are Bombas. I'm wearing Bombas now. They are truly the best.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like how good can they be, and then you're like, oh, they're actually better. So
yeah, this is like where there is like a level of differentiation, right? There's so many products out there that are, and I think to bring it back to the episode, yes, someone can spin up a shitty version of Fairing and have something out quickly and imitate and have 30% value and capture some money, but like the real thing is significantly better, right? Like I have Reebok socks. I have other socks in my drawer. They don't get worn.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm just slowly replacing all my other ones with the real ones. So.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much for coming on. It was great chatting with you. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.